I'm Peter Anderson, in many ways an average 33-year-old Scandinavian guy, one of 4 partners in a successful plumbing business. When this story begins, I'm married to Sandra, 32, almost regarded as a trophy wife and working as a secretary for the owner of the local Volvo dealership. Our daughter Ella is 8 years old. We own a house in a nice area of our town and a summer house on a popular island in the Baltic Sea. Sandra and I met for the first time when I was installing the town's new central heating system at her parents' house. She was still living at home and was in a very bad mood because she had recently broken her engagement with a brat by the nickname Souvenir, for the simple reason that an angry husband had shot him with a salt load from a shotgun at his bare bottoms while the Souvenir was having intimacy with the shooter's wife. This Souvenir was a funny guy. His mother had been the au pair girl in California and was 4 months pregnant when she came back, which is why her child used to be called California Souvenir and later shortened to Souvenir. She gave him the name Jefferson because the girl thought her handsome lover had called himself for that, probably as his first name. Souvenir's mom somehow met Anders Lind, her old classmate, a poor, shy guy in school, where she never cared a thing about him. But now when she needed a father to her Souvenir, she married him after living together with him for a short time. Anders didn't care about her bringing a Souvenir with her because he regarded it as a low price for marrying a pretty girl that he could only dream about. Anders adopted her baby, and to everybody's surprise, they went well together, got 2 daughters, and built up Anders's small computer shop to a chain of 12 big stores, which they sold to a huge multinational company for a fair price, and bought a big mansion at the countryside where Anders, his wife and daughters began raising horses. Anders spoiled his stepson to a real brat who got everything he never was able to get himself in his own younger days. As Souvenir was a handsome rich guy, he became very successful with girls, at least until he met Sandra and fell in real love with her. But to his disappointment, she had no intentions about intimacy before her wedding night. Of course, that was a slight problem for Souvenir because he had simple solutions for that matter. Sandra was really in a very sad mood after Souvenir's cheating, so I wanted to cheer her up and asked for a date that she accepted. We had a wonderful evening, which ended up in my apartment where she told me that she had decided to change her lifestyle and from now on do everything as her friends did. To my great surprise and pride, she, after an intensive tender necking, allowed me to enter her. Probably as revenge for Souvenir for his cheating because I, despite several serious attempts, didn't get any further date with her. Instead, there began to be rumors about Sandra as a rather wild party girl with many short relations, even with some of Souvenir's friends. Souvenir had no interest in living quiet country life at his parents' mansion, so he left town for studies at a university where he continued to work on his reputation as a very successful womanizer. Despite his many successful seductions, he could never accept and forget that Sandra, during her wild days, had been with several of his friends, but had denied him to have intimacy with her while they were engaged with rings and talking about great plans for the future. About a year after my successful date with Sandra, I met her at a party and we began dating again. She promised me that her wild life was history, why we had good times together. Rather soon, we were regarded as a couple and married after 3 years when she got pregnant with Ella. A few months after the wedding, I did a plumber job for one of Souvenir's old friends, who teased me by telling me that Souvenir had sworn to have intimacy with Sandra in all her openings and show evidence about that to the whole town. The friend said that as far as he knew, Souvenir had never failed in his attempts to seduce a married woman when he really had wanted her and did his very best to get her. Not very happy news for a newlywed, which I told Sandra, who promised to never give him any chance to be alone with her and be able to perform his nasty intentions. Of course, I was extra careful about any clues for a while, but just as expected, nothing at all happened, and after some years I heard that Souvenir had married some wealthy English girl and was living in England. Sandra and I had a rather average marriage with its ups and downs. Therefore, Souvenir's threat was forgotten for many years until it hit me as an unexpected lightning from a clear blue sky. I can still remember that awful Wednesday evening just as it had been yesterday. Sandra and I were sitting in our living room watching the weather girl on the TV telling us good news for the coming weekend when she got a serious look on her face and told me, "My dear Peter, please listen to me because I have something very important to tell you." "Yes, go on." "Something that happened to you today?" I asked. "No, not at all. In fact, it's an old story which began before you and I met. Do you remember that I was engaged to a handsome guy by the name of Jeff Lind?" "Oh, yes. I remember that creepy souvenir because he was shot in his back with a salt load from a shotgun when he was found with somebody's wife. There are still some rumors about this guy. He says to still be a real jerk indeed. What about him? Is he shot again?" Sandra had turned pale for some reason when she replied, "No, of course not. He is living in England but was here at some old friend's wedding where Gabriella Erickson, you know her, met him and they got acquainted. When he found out that she knew me, he was very curious and asked a lot about me and why she gave him my cell phone number." I could still remember what this Jeff Lind, better known under his nickname Souvenir, had promised to do with Sandra, which is why I understood that there was some crap to come. The warning bells rang in my ears when I asked, "Did he call you?" "Yes, he did, and we have talked a few times about good old times," she replied. "Good old times? It is almost 10 years ago you two were together for a few months. He cheated and you dumped him. Not much for any good old times." "You don't understand. We had so many dreams about the future we want to talk about," she replied. "Isn't that future with the souvenir behind you? Or what's the problem?" I asked. "He would like to see me," she replied. "Of course he wants to see you. You know very well that he has promised to take you in all your 3 openings and show evidence to his friends. It would be a bit difficult to do that by phone." Sandra was ashen gray when she replied, "Don't see ghosts in daylight when I'm trying to have a serious talk with you. He wants to see me as a friend and nothing else." Now I was sure about problems to come and said, "See you as a friend? No problem. You can invite him and his family to come and see us during the weekend. Okay for me as long as the English wife is with him." "No, he's not coming here because he has won a bonus week at a 5-star hotel at Capri and invited me to go there with him because his wife neither has time to go nor dare to fly. She thrusts him and doesn't have any objections if he wants to see and talk about old times with an old friend." I shouted, "But I have objections, very serious objections indeed. Have you lost your common sense and gone insane? You ought to see a therapist as soon as possible, that's for sure. Please calm down and listen to me. I have already accepted to go and I intend to go because it is a once-in-a-lifetime offer. You and I can never afford to spend a week at such a hotel at Capri, at least not for the time being when we have so much expenses at the summer house." She was right about that because the romantic island of Capri is the most expensive of all Italian holiday resorts and therefore popular among rich and famous people. I continued shouting, "Do you still love that damn creep?" Sandra had turned pale when she replied, "No, of course not. I love you and you ought to know that you are my only love." "Isn't it a strange way to show your so-called love for me by going to Capri for having intimacy with that damn souvenir creep?" I asked. No, of course not. Have I said a word about intimacy with him? He has not demanded anything from me and I have not promised him anything. The truth is that I have no intentions of cheating you," she replied. I couldn't take much more of her nonsense and yelled, "No intimacy and not cheating me? Why in the hell do you think he will take the expenses and bring a cheating woman with him to that expensive exotic place? Doesn't matter if he has conned some sucker to pay the bill. If you don't think that he is going to have intimacy with you, as he has bragged to do, you must be incredibly naive. That's the simple and disgusting truth, and I can bet a lot that his evidence will be visible on the web." She was obviously surprised about my objections and sobbed, "Do you really regard me as a cheating woman because Jeff has earned a bonus week at Capri and offered me to go with him because his wife can't do that?" I'd have been crazy if I hadn't accepted Jeff's kind offer for having such a great holiday for free. Did his wife say that to you? Yes, I regard you as a cheating woman. No doubt about that, and please remember, once a cheating woman, always cheating woman in people's opinion. You can never wash away that reputation when you are back home, I replied. Obviously, she hadn't expected such comments because she continued sobbing and said, "You'll see that everything will be fine when I'm back because nothing nasty will happen there at Capri and nobody but you will know I'm going there with Jeff." I know and don't see any reason to keep your madness a secret, especially not when the whole town will soon be able to see your videos and my terrible humiliation on the web. Now she began to fear that the price for her free trip would be much higher than expected and told me, "Please don't do that to me and to us. I promise to keep you well rewarded when coming back home. There's only one thing you can do if you want matters to remain fine between you and me. Take your phone, call the damn souvenir and cancel the trip. Do it now." "I'm sorry, but I can't do that," she replied. Those words from Sandra were the last straw on my back that broke my marriage, so any further arguing for saving it felt meaningless. "In that case, I can only say, have a nice trip, though I hate what you are doing," I replied. To my great surprise, I could feel some kind of relief when I went to the living room and poured up a large glass of my best single malt whiskey. Neither Sandra nor I had any further comments about her trip. If our problems had been limited to her trip, I'm sure there had been ways to get her to cancel it, but the main reason for my relief was that now I would get rid of our expensive summer house, which had been a real pain in my back. Several of Sandra's friends had summer houses on a popular island in the Baltic Sea, which is why she had forced me to have us buy a house there for a sky-high price. I had refused as much as I could, but gave in when Sandra began talking about separation. She didn't understand that some of her friends had inherited their houses, others shared houses with their parents, or had bought them a long time ago at a quite different price level. We bought ours at the top of the boom, which almost got us ruined. Though we had sold most of our shares, we even had taken a big loan with huge payments for interest. The house itself wasn't enough for her. She even demanded me to work with the maintenance all summer weekends and my whole summer holidays, which created serious quarrels and made me feel like a slave when working with that, in most cases, completely unnecessary maintenance. Of course, Sandra had promised to assist me, but she never did because her friends and she had always something going on. Hiring people to do all the jobs was out of the question for economic reasons. I saw no end of Sandra's demands and suggestions for maintenance. Sandra always found new ideas in her magazines, and I had seriously begun to regret that I didn't choose the separation. Sandra's latest craziness was planning and demanding me to make a Japanese garden on a nice lawn during the next summer. I suspected that nowadays she regarded me as a wimp after her victory in our first summer house quarrel and thought that once a wimp, always wimp would mean me even accept her Capri trip after some nagging. But the last straw on the poor camel's back was one straw too much. Not much was said during the evening, and the next morning she was in a good mood again, gave me a bright smile and jokingly asked, "Do you still think you are married to a cheating woman?" "Have you canceled your trip?" I asked. "No, and I can't do that because I don't have any intentions of going on such a trip." "You asked about my opinion, and it still remains as, yes, I'm married to a cheating woman." Her bright smile faded away when she shouted, "Who cares about your opinion?" Nothing further was said during the breakfast. My first thing at the job was to call Anne Broland at her job. She sounded surprised but accepted my invitation for lunch. Anne is a lovely woman living 4 houses from us, and she is mother to my daughter's best friend, Wilma. Anne dumped her cheating creep of a husband about 5 months ago. She is quite different from Sandra, and I must confess that I've admired her very much for a long time. Though she is not such a trophy wife as Sandra, Anne must be regarded as rather handsome. After some small talk at our lunch, I told Anne that I would tell her a secret if she promised to keep it, and even offer her a fair gift. Anne was surprised, but promised to keep my secret, and I told her that Sandra would be going to Capri with her old boyfriend, the Souvenir, and I would file for divorce. The gift was that I offered Anne and her daughter to come with my daughter Ella and me to Euro Disney in Paris with all their expenses paid. She suspected some hidden crap and asked, "What are the conditions for that trip?" "There are no conditions. Not before the trip, not during the trip, and not after the trip. The only matter is if it would be easier for me and funnier for Ella to be there with a friend." "Can you tell me a few more details about your plans for that trip? Please remember that I neither can nor want to replace Sandra in any way," she replied. "No need for that. I don't have any plan because if you say yes, we'll plan everything together. Think about it and give me a call when you can say yes or no." Thereafter, Anne asked me several questions about my divorce, and I told her the truth about Sandra's trip to Capri with her ex-boyfriend. Only 1 hour after lunch, she called me, and after a few questions, she said, yes. Already the same evening, Anne had fixed a babysitter for her daughter, and we met at my job to talk about our trip. We had no problems agreeing on all the details. I had expected her to want 2 separate rooms in Paris, but she suggested that a family room would be more fun for our daughters. I had no objections. Thereafter, Anne and I had almost daily phone calls at our jobs, and everything went fine for our trip. We booked flights to Paris, rented a car, and booked a room at a hotel near Euro Disney. Sandra and I didn't have any further quarrel about her trip. The only difference was that I had lost my interest in intimacy with her, but obviously she didn't care much about that, at least not during the first week after our quarrel. I used the time to take small steps against my divorce, but had to be very careful about keeping Sandra out of my plans. One day when I was away to a gas station for washing her car, I found that she had forgotten some papers in the glove compartment, obviously printed out from a computer at her job. It was color prints from the Capri Hotel's homepage and a mail from Souvenir about their flight time and about the boat to Capri. It indeed was a great gift for me, almost as if she was teasing me on purpose. Sandra had probably canceled her trip if I had given her the ultimatum, stay at home or divorce. But I didn't see any reason to give her that last chance to save her marriage and the damn summer house, because in my opinion, she had already cheated me when she said yes to Souvenir's invitation to her Capri trip, and she must have understood that an infamous womanizer as Souvenir didn't invite her to an expensive holiday for only talking about old times. Sandra knew what he expected from her, and she had accepted to give it to him. Of course, I was in almost similar situation because of my trip with Anne and the promise to her not to have any conditions for our trip. But our trip was a quite different matter because Anne was single, and I had signed my divorce papers when we left for our trip. What could happen between Anne and me after the trip would be a different question. Sandra had no objections when I told her that Ella and I would be going to Euro Disney in Paris while she was at Capri and didn't question any details. Both Sandra and I, probably for different reasons, had lost our interest in intimacy until the last evening before her departure. She had some packing to do, so I went to bed before her, but to my great surprise, she woke me up by coming stark naked to my bed. Due to the long time since our last intimacy, I immediately got excited and did the deed. After finishing, I went immediately to the bathroom to clean up. Back in the bedroom, she was sitting on her own bed sobbing. I told her good night and lay down in my own bed with my back against her. Sandra sobbed. "Why did you do that to me?" she asked. "Did what? You offered me and I took it," I replied. She continued sobbing. "But you threatened me as a cheating woman. Why did you do that to me, your own wife?" "Because in my humble opinion, you are a cheating woman," I replied. She shouted, "Oh my God, we have to talk." "Yes, we'll talk when we are back from our trips." She left early in the morning for the airport, and when I knew they were on the boat to Capri, I rang Souvenir's wife and had a serious talk with her. She got angry as a bee and told me that her dear Jefferson had gone far too far this time. It had been a rather easy game to find her. A phone call to Sandra's friend Gabriella at her had told me where in England Souvenir was living with his family. People with unusual names are usually easy to find, which is why there haven't been any problems finding phone numbers for the Lind family's home phone. Then I wrote a letter to Sandra. Dear Sandra, your old and new boyfriend Souvenir seems to be a bad liar because his wife told me that she was working as an air hostess when meeting her husband, and it had been a great pleasure for her to have a week's vacation at Capri. You ought to have talked with her instead of believing everything that the Souvenir told you. However, she promised to come to Capri as soon as possible for a serious talk with your lover and you. Enclosed, please find copies of the divorce papers the court received today. From now on, can feel free to do whatever you want to do without caring a thing about me. Of course, you didn't care much about me earlier either. Otherwise, you hadn't been at Capri reading this letter. Peter, your soon-to-be ex-husband. I called their hotel reception and they promised to give my fax to Sandra when Souvenir and she checked into the hotel. Then I faxed the letter and the divorce papers to the hotel. Both the home phone and my cell phone began to ring several times as soon as Sandra was expected to have checked into the hotel. I didn't take any voice calls but read her text messages. 1 hour after the first, she sent me this. I'm coming back home tomorrow so we can clear up this misunderstanding. I replied, you are not sharing a hotel room with the damn Souvenir by any misunderstanding. You went there on purpose and now you have to pay the consequences. No reason to complain. Ella and I will be abroad for a few days. I don't care a shit about where you are. Later that evening, I even got a call from Abby Lind, who told me that she was already in Napoli and had demanded Jeff to immediately throw Sandra out of their hotel room. Jeff had called her back 15 minutes later and promised that Sandra had now left the hotel, which meant she had left it less than 1 hour after coming there. Abby doubted that Sandra and Jeff had been in the mood for any love after her phone calls with Jeff and Sandra trying to call me after receiving her divorce papers. Abby said she would take a jet boat to Capri after breakfast. And the girls and I left for our trip the next morning. We flew with Air France to Orly, where we got the Renault Megane we had booked to rent. Most GPS units sold here have maps for the whole of Western Europe, and as mine was rather newly updated, it was almost a piece of cake to find our hotel. The girls were happy about having each other on the trip, and Anne and I got very well together why it wasn't any problems in our family room, except that the 2 double beds were what the French call grand lit, which means a slightly wider single bed. Anne and I looked at each other, bursting into laughter, and that problem was solved. I didn't care much about Sandra, though she was back home already the next day after she had left. Because I didn't take any phone calls, she sent me a lot of text messages and tried to explain that she had not cheated me and spent her only night at Capri alone at another hotel. I replied she cheated me already when she said yes to Souvenir's invitation to spend a week with him, and she had left him only because he threw her out of their hotel room when he got cold feet after talking with his wife. Of course, I didn't know for sure, but probably a very good guess. Anne didn't take any part in those text messages from Anne to Sandra. We spent 2 intensive and pleasant days at the Euro Disney, and all 4 of us had a really good time. Our 3rd day in France we spent in Paris shopping, visiting the Eiffel Tower, Versailles, and a boat trip on the Seine. When our girls had fallen asleep during our last night at the hotel, Anne said that she wanted to give me a gift and told me to remain silent. Then she slowly went down under the comforter, took off my boxer shorts, and to my great pleasure began kissing. When she whispered in my ear, "Peter, I love you," I replied, "I love you, Anne." Though our intimacy was both slow and silent for not waking up the sleeping girls, it was very good and memorable for both of us, because we knew that it was the beginning of a new time in our lives. Afterward, when we were close together in bed, Anne asked me if I would love her even back home, and I promised her that real love doesn't depend on where we are. She replied with hot kisses, but we had no more intimacy during that night. Anne wanted to know my plans for the future, and I told her that for several reasons it was out of the question for me to cancel my divorce, and the first thing for me to do was to find somewhere to live. She immediately replied, "You can be my lodger and get a loving hostess." What could I say? Only ask, "Are you serious?" Yes, I am. If you told me the truth about your love for me, Ella and you are welcome living with Wilma and me. I love you and accept your kind offer, I replied. Both of us understood that it had been a very fast decision to move into her house after only 4 days together, when both of us had probably only shown the best of us. But before we fell asleep, we agreed that one must dare to win. Sandra wasn't a loving wife when she found out what was going on between Anne and me. She cried hysterically when I began moving out my personal belongings to Anne's house, and she begged me to stay with her, but the only thing I could do was to tell her that she burnt her bridges behind her when she refused to skip her trip to Capri for entertaining her souvenir there. My first night at Anne's house was unforgettable, with tender intimacy for several hours. Her husband must be a real jackass who cheated such a lovely woman. Of course, nobody can be perfect in all possible matters, neither she nor me. But I was sure we could find solutions when we got problems. Anne's and mine first fidelity came already after living together for only 1 month, when somebody tried to create serious problems between us. I got a private mail without sender to my job. In the letter and enclosed picture, written with a low-quality inkjet color printer, I could read that it was well known among her friends that even Anne Broland had intimacy with Jeff Lind, and I ought to know what she had done at the conference she attended 2 weeks ago. The color print showed Anne standing on a bar desk with her knickers down at her ankles and her hands holding up her short skirt. I ought to have been furious and done something stupid, but I didn't, because something in my mind told me that something must be wrong. After calmed down for a few minutes, I took a closer look at the picture and noted a few incorrect details on it. Through the low printing quality, it was obvious that her watch wasn't the same one she had been using since I met her, and her hair was slightly shorter than it really was. Back home, I gave the letter and picture to Anne and asked for her comments. She replied that she thought Jeff had intimacy with her, or more probably raped her when she was heavily boozed during a wild midsummer night party in their school days. But he had always denied doing that. Then she burst into laughter when she saw the picture of her dancing on a bar desk, gave me an album, and shoved her own pictures from a funny game at a Christmas party held by the company she worked for. One could see the date and time in her pictures. In Anne's pictures, she and several girls in line at a dance floor doing the same thing, and she said that it was a competition about walking fastest over the floor with panties at their ankles, and it wasn't their own panties. Anne and I had agreed about having a life before we met, and I didn't have any reason to care what she had done or not done in her school days. Our problem was to find out who had faked pictures from that old Christmas party, was skilled enough to do that rather well-done modification of a picture with a Photoshop program, and obviously hated Anne or me or both of us enough to do that. We never found out the sender, but never received any more faked pictures after Anne had shown them to several people at her job and promised a reward for finding out who had done it, because a biker friend of mine had promised to have a serious talk with that creep. Anne's and mine love grew stronger after that. We knew some people envied us very much. Sandra and I sold our summer house, and she used her part of the money, and her parents paid the rest so she could afford to buy my share of our house. We agreed about shared custody for Ella, who used to spend plenty of time with us even during Sandra's weeks to have her. Anne says that it is okay for her because our girls now are sisters. Abby and I still use to keep some connection via emails, which is why I know that she and Souvenir split up about 2 months after their holiday at Capri. The simple reason is that he had forgotten his cell phone at her parents' house after their weekend visit there, and her curious dad investigated the phone and found several adult messages to and from a mistress. That was too much for Abby, who had swore never again when she had forgiven him for his attempts with Sandra at Capri. Sandra was in rather bad shape during the first weeks after I left her, but is back now as a gorgeous single woman. Both Sandra and Souvenir lost their interest in further talking about memories of their good old times after paying a high price for their first failed attempt. They accused each other of all problems and can hardly be regarded as loving friends any longer. Sandra has been dating several men and is already involved in her second long relationship. Her first guy was an awkward fellow, why it only lasted 1 month. Ella says that Mom's new boyfriend is very much better in many ways than the first. His only problem seems to be that even though he is newly divorced, and his wife cleaned him rather well before dumping him. Anne and I are planning for our wedding, and everything is going well between the girls and between us. During my first days at her house, we spent a lot of time talking about how we wanted to have our future together. Of course, we might have different opinions on many matters, but with giving and taking from both sides, there is always a solution. Our love life is on a very good level, and we have agreed to have a baby and are working hard to get one. Even our daughters are looking forward to a little baby brother or baby sister. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.